That's one of the recurring themes of the comic is about how do we control our impulses, be our best selves so that we can create a healthy family and a healthy community. I'm really into the community aspect of it. Hi, I'm William Gosline, creator, writer, and CEO of Own Goal Books. You can find me at babybarbarian.com or on Instagram at Own Goal Books. But most importantly, please check out the Baby Barbarian crowdfunding campaign at the link in the description below. And you're watching and listening to Two Geeks Talking.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Two Geeks Talking is an entertainment industry interview show where we interview the creative people from the comic, film, TV, movie, and video game industries. And of course, I'm your host, Kurt Sasso. We are joined today by a brand new guest. He is, of course, a wonderfully talented creator out of Seattle, an amazing young adult graphic novel, Baby Barbarian. He was also recommended by another amazing creator, Nina Pizzarillos, who was on the show in the past. We're joined by the ever-talented William Gosling. How are you doing today?
Good. I'm good. Thanks, Kurt. Thanks for having me on.
For those that don't know anything about yourself as a creative person, tell us who you are and what you're bringing to Two Geeks Talking today.
Well, let's see. What I have done is I've written this comic called Baby Barbarian. Started it in about 2021 during COVID. But I've done a lot of writing. I have an MFA in creative nonfiction. I also write some screenplays, just some prose. I've also done some freelance writing for game companies. But Baby Barbarian was the first thing that I did on my own steam to kickstart, using crowdfunding as a way of getting it out into the world. And that was during COVID. And what I really wanted to do was I wanted to make something positive out of that experience. I don't know what it was like for you in Canada, but it was pretty rough down here.
Society went to heck and back for 3 some odd years there. But that's what I loved about, I hated about that time, but I loved about that particular time was the creativity that was coming out of that particular setback of life, which was, what you were seeing and what we're creating. And I just love the fact that this is a spawn of that, which worked out very well for you. And it's beautifully drawn. It's well written. It's engaging. And I think that's something that we don't get a lot of these days when it comes to comics or graphic novels, especially for the young adults audience as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So the art for the first 2 issues. So this is the crowdfunding campaign that I'm currently planning. It's going to be doing in the next couple of days is for the 3rd issue. And we've done issue 1 and 2. And the art, as you mentioned, was done by this Polish artist named Igor Wolski. And he's still out there, very prolific, but that was for the first 2 issues. And then the art for this other one is a Brazilian artist named Arthur Mask. Arthur had, for this 2nd issue, he did the pencils, the inks, and the colors. And his style is such that, you really can't, sometimes, as you might have a penciler, then you might have an inker, and then you might have a colorist, right? And his style is such that you really can't separate it. Yeah, he's great. He's great.
Let's talk about some of the characters here that are involved with it. Obviously, you have Baby Barbarian, but are there any characters that just spoke to you when you were writing them, or spoke through you, I should say, as you were writing them? You thought these were just characters you always had to have in the series?
So when I write stuff, I'm kind of sometimes I call them like pantsers. That's a term some people use, basically writing by the seat of your pants, because I like to find something as I'm going as well. So like, for example, in the first issue, I was like, well, in this scene at the beginning, I was like, you know what? We got to put somebody in the town who's listening to these people talk. And then he runs off into the alley and he's like in a shadowy cloak. And I was like, well, who is that? Well, I don't know, but I'll find out. You know what I mean? So I think most of these characters they just emerged from the setting. And in fact, like in the first comic, there's a few characters in these first 2 comics. I told Igor, he's one of the reasons why I wanted to work with him was because he's very good at world building for his own stuff. So I was like, hey, this guy, I was like, just go to town. It's barbarian themed. I gave him like some certain criteria, like the town has a palisade around it, for instance, and it has like a stave cathedral. It's like a Viking cathedral, very steep. Also, like the main tavern. that they go into called the Blustering Blowfish. The proprietor of it is named Wolf Foxhound. He has a bunch of skeletons up on the wall of fish, just basically things that he's hunted. And of course, he's missing one of his hands, and he has a hook because it's a Moby Dick reference. And so like Igor, he takes all that stuff and he really just goes to town with it. He would really just go to town with it. And he developed a couple characters that I ended up actually, there are these two silent characters. One is called Antlers and the other one is Bear Pants. And they're like these kids. And he just drew them when he was showing that the town where Baby Barbarian, the family, is set in is called Lethom. And when he started developing that town at the very beginning, he would put in all these sort of strange characters. And these were two that recurred. I should at least say that for sure, I did know that I was going to have three characters, and those were the mom, the dad, and the boy. And like I said, I did it during COVID. My wife and myself and my son, we had just moved back to Seattle from Hawaii. And 6 months later, we get, shellacked by COVID. And like my wife was onboarding remotely to a new job. And my son and I, we were stuck in an apartment, like everybody else. I had to somehow digest that situation. You know what I mean? The mom is kind of like my wife, the dad is kind of like me, and then the boy is kind of like my son. So their names are Brom Berserk is the boy, Bjorn Berserk is the dad, and Brunhild Berserk is the mom. As you know, there's a trope called the rage trope for berserkers. I use that as a metaphor for ADHD because both my son and I have pretty severe ADHD. And so one of the things I wanted to do was make it a little bit therapeutic about how, the two characters, this barbarian rage ability, it goes through his family, through the berserks, which is a patrilineal line. Then he has to learn not only how to unlock it, but also how to control it. That's one of the recurring themes of the comic, is about how do we control our impulses, be our best selves so that we can create a healthy family and a healthy community. I'm really into the community aspect of it. As you mentioned, and this is what set me off in this long tangential speech, was that, there's so many funny characters in there.
You're building a community in the series, but you're also building a community with your fans and readers of the books itself, no matter the age group. And I think that's wonderful to see. We're on to The Forgotten God. Obviously, you have a game plan for your Baby Barbarian series. We're into book 3.
Mhm.
How long is the series going to be? And are we at the end in terms of writing it, or is there more to come?
So there's a third issue, and then the number 1 and number 2 are the arc. It's called Baby Barbarian and the Player's Throne, and that is a complete arc. So it's 60-page comic in total by the same artist. And then the second one is the first half of another arc. This one will definitely have a second issue to it, where I wrap up all of the different threads that I've thrown in there. Yeah. But after that, I mean, who knows? You know what I mean? I actually had a talk with a guy who has a company in the game space, the RPG space, because one of the things I wanted to do was I would like to ideally have this story be told or be shown in different mediums, games. And I'm a gamer, so I love that whole thing. And I don't know about you, but I feel like RPGs have taken a little bit of like the comic space. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I could see that. There's a few things where they were the comic book medium and they turned into either a TTRPG or into a video game specifically. But I think it really depends on, are we going open world? Like I could see Baby Barbarian as a TTRPG or a D&D session or something along that line. Because I think you have so many engaging characters, you could easily build upon the world in terms of creating your own character for it. I think that would be pretty amazing too. But I guess it depends on what you'd like to create for it or what you would like to see created for it. But even just a one-shot side scroller or top-down video game would be pretty amazing too.
Somebody did make a very, very simple Metroidvania. style. And then he imported the characters, and it was sort of like, and he brought in some of the panels and stuff like that. It was more of a proof of concept, I would say. Yeah, so absolutely, absolutely, and yeah, you could have it as a session or whatever. And one of the things that I also did was I had a guy named Jamie Noble. He did the map of the world of Shenanigania, which is where everything occurs. I said, hey, let's put a bunch of sort of landmarks in there. You know what I mean? You know, those old maps. And then instead of having the names of the places, we just kind of leave them blank. The idea was, to kind of, what is that, crowdsource the names of the different places in the world. I really would like to have it be, co-inhabited by different people. And as you said, the intergenerational aspect is really important.
But I love that excitement. I love hearing that in creators' voices. And I'm sure you've had your son involved with the process every so often. The Forgotten God, what's the core emotional hook of that particular book for you? Why was this the right idea for the new art?
I don't know, man. That is a really good question. Let me think about that for a second. Why is this the right emotional arc? Yeah, because in the story, again, they get into an argument again. And, the mom ends up leaving, the dad has to follow, it's sort of the opposite of the first comic, right? And then there's it, who is the forgotten god? And then at the end of the comic, there's this character who's introduced that is going to be prevalent in the second issue. That person and their sidekick are, so what these antagonists are doing is related to why the gods are forgotten. Honestly, I think up north, you guys know what we're going through down here. There's a lot of bad faith efforts to sort of tear communities and our country apart. You know what I mean? And I'm going to get more into that, but I just wanted to explore it. I mean, maybe only for my own therapeutic things, because I think a lot of people don't really necessarily have answers for a lot of this stuff, except maybe to try and have some patience, you know what I mean, with other people and not be so reactionary. There is an aspect to this particular one about the theme of family and found family versus biological family, and how do you reconcile those two things? Because Mira, they found in the first comic, she was a prisoner in this castle. They bring her back. They promise they're going to take her back to see her family. Problem is, they get enmeshed in their small town barbarian life, and they don't do it. And she's, and sometimes kids, they don't have agency, right? They don't have a voice. But eventually, and that's, the starting incident, right? They call it in books and all that, and movies. An inciting incident is that, they leave to take her back. So she's sort of like the found family aspect. But then as they're leaving and as they're going through the mountains, the cold, fast mountains where they live, they run into one of their biological family. You know what I mean? That's problematic, I guess, to say the least, in terms of the effect it has on the family when they run into one of their long estranged family members. So there's that. And then there's also, I think, part of the theme also has to do with these people in these mountains, these barbarians. They're very isolated. They're simple. They're funny. They're funny. They're silly people, right? There's forces that are sort of undermining their belief system. That's also something that I think we see. There is so many people's belief systems, things that we've taken for granted about how our world is, how our societies are, how our life is, are being, challenged right now, if not subverted. And so that's kind of a big answer, but there's a lot of moving parts in this.
That's what I noticed, especially with your character interactions, and the themes were very expressive in terms of from section to section, chapter to chapter that I got to read through. That's why I was so hooked on it, and that's why I was so engaged with the copies I got to read there. I could feel what you were going for. I'm curious in terms of from a younger audience perspective, like any feedback from that level besides your son?
Well, my son, he's very he's pretty resistant. He likes it, but he's pretty mum on. We don't really talk a lot about it. You know what I mean? But I have talked to, other people whose kids have gone, yeah, the kids like it. One of the things is, get the parents and then they read it to the kid. That's why ideally, as time goes on, get it into a trade paperback. You know what I mean? Like Bone or something like that. The parent can read it to the kid. But I did have one person tell me, his son was asking him like, "What's this? What's this? What's this?" And he's like, "Dude, I don't know." You know what I mean? So I think it's like what do you call it? Like it's a co-journey for both the adult and the child. And that was something that I kind of wanted, right? Was, a way to create something to talk about and to explore. Overall, I've had good feedback from people who have children about the comic. Yeah, for sure.
I'm sure the parents get frustrated saying, look, I just got this the same time as you. I'm here for the journey as well. So ask your questions at the end.
Yeah, yeah, totally. We'll Google it afterwards.
Yeah,
Not
there you go. You did describe Baby Barbarian as gonzo fantasy. Why that particular phrase, gonzo fantasy, when you have so many different themes that show up?
Okay, I don't really know exactly what gonzo fantasy means. I heard it in reference to, like you have epic fantasy, right? Then you have dark fantasy, you have all these things. And there's a lot of effort goes into sort of explaining why there are things that there are there. That's not this. You know what I mean? If there's a sphinx that happens to show up, then there's a sphinx that happens to show up. You know what I mean? If they start playing in a, like in the second one, they form a little rock band and they're singing through a fish amplifier. It's just so I don't know. So that I had heard that term somewhere. I don't remember where I heard it, but I was like, I've never heard that before. But that seems right. It's Gonzo. It's just it's no real rhyme or reason.
It's a fun read, is what it is. It's fun fantasy, and I can understand that. And why does everything have to make absolute 100% sense? I don't see the need for that 100% of the time.
I
Some
agree.
cases, yes, but not everything. Not in reading, not in fantasy. It's all right. That's why we enjoy sci-fi and all these other genres as well too, because they fit the niches that we enjoy and that we are gravitated towards.
I would also say, you saw that it has a strong theme, right? And I think that is what is more important to me is the theme of it. So, you know what? If I have to throw in a horse and buggy to get that theme, through the gate, then that's what I do. But that's my priority.
Speaking of rock bands and songs here, you obviously did a song with your son called "We Are Proud Barbarians," which, by the way, I loved. I thought that was just it was fantastic, truly. How did that come about, and was it a planned thing that happened, or was it just a happy accident that you could share with the community of Baby Barbarian?
For the first Kickstarter, I wanted to create what's that called? A theme song. So this is kind of funny. So my son was singing in a choir at our church over here. This is a while ago. He doesn't do it anymore, but there was this song they were singing that was so cool, and it was in Latin, and it was about a donkey, and it was from like the 1400s. You know what I mean? I was like, that melody is so amazing. So I listened to the melody, and then what I did was I lived in Hawaii for a long time, and I had friends over there, Hawaiian musician friends, and one of them showed me the slack key tuning. I tuned the guitar to open D. I found the notes from this melody on the guitar, and then I just put lyrics to the existing melody. And then I asked my son to sing it with me. And he did, which was nice because he's got a very nice voice. And that was a while ago. At that time, he still had that very sort of like cherubic voice. You know what I mean? But so the lyrics are, "We are proud barbarians, uncivilized contrarians. Some would call us pagans because we wear no leggings," which is, again, it's ridiculous, right? But all the characters, you notice that the men, they don't wear any leggings, right? Even though it's very cold up in the cold, fast mountains, they don't wear leggings. I mean,
For us, that's just a typical day that ends in Y, so it is what
oh,
it is.
so you guys don't wear leggings in Ontario either, then?
Oh,
Okay,
very,
well.
very rarely. I mean, I'm in shorts and a t-shirt until there's at least a foot of snow. Like it is what it is. So, um, our weather aside, though, here when it comes to this campaign, obviously you have another campaign on the go. Three campaigns. You've been successful with the other two. We're currently ongoing with this campaign here. What's something that you brought over from your other campaigns to this campaign, whether it's products or a new marketing strategy, or you're really excited to showcase your community of Baby Barbarian?
Well, one thing was I'm doing it on Backerit instead of on Kickstarter. I think because Backerit, I'm sure you know this, but just in case other folks don't know it, it was a way to, I think, keep track of fulfillment for Kickstarter campaigns. They had a whole system worked out for that. Then they were like, well, let's just go ahead and crowdfund these things ourselves. I was listening to them and I was like, you know what? Kickstarter is great. Don't get me wrong. But I was like, you know what? These guys have seen everything that Kickstarter has done. They have that benefit of having all that beta stuff tested over there, and then they're bringing it over to their platform. I went and I looked at how they do things, and I'm just be completely honest with you, as somebody who's ADHD, like my mind can really wander a lot, and if I have a solid list, I mean, that's at the end of the day, like having something that can provide me with a list is very useful. So that's one thing that Backer has, they didn't used to do that in Kickstarter as much, you know what I mean? Especially for the stories, right? In the middle of the campaign part. This one, it has everything and I just fill it out and it's so useful. We are going to be selling the first issues. And then also, if people pledge in the first 48 hours, there's an incentive, and that is there's the collected edition of Baby Barbarian in the Igor Wolski cover. I have some of those, and I'm going to make those only available for 50% off for people who back it in the first 48 hours. So otherwise, if you want to have the original stories, of course you can get digital downloads, then the comics will be separated. So it would be Baby Barbarian issue 1, Baby Barbarian issue 2, and then Baby Barbarian issue 3. Now there are variant covers from the old ones, and all of those will also be available. But one thing I also want to say is that I'm trying this out. I don't know if what this will be like, but as well as giving for the digital pledge levels, as well as giving the digital book away, I'm going to give access to global comics. The reason why is because, when you give the digital book away, it's usually a download, which is fine. Sometimes people go in there, download it. Maybe it doesn't feel so good, downloading something from the computer if they're not entirely certain, you know what I mean? Whatever, for whatever reason. Man, there's a lot of reasons to be a little bit dubious about that. But then Global Comics, Global Comics? Yeah, of course. Yeah. Then also give access to the comic on that because it's so good for the platform for on whatever device that you might be using. So that's also something I'm trying. I don't know if I've heard of other people doing that as a way to distribute a digital copy of a comic. So but that's something I'm trying. I don't see why it wouldn't work as long as I get the digital download as well.
Any other levels or besides the books themselves? Are you trying digital merchandising like gifts or stickers or things like that? Or is it just strictly just focusing on the books themselves? It's easier for people to just focus on the book.
In prior campaigns, I had like bags. In fact, I still have some bags. I might just throw them in with people. You know what I mean? Just to like, but
Get rid of them, right?
get rid of them. But I did all that stuff, because I was being a monkey and I was monkey see, monkey do, and I kind of think I was like, you know what, it's fine. You know what I mean? Kiss, you know what I mean? Keep it simple, stupid. Like the focus of this is on the print comic, and that's it. Now, having said that, there is something that I have done, and I figure if I like it, you know what I mean? It's like making your own food, right? If you like how it tastes, at least one person's happy. So I'm gonna be offering some like small posters that people can get. There's two really cool posters that I had made. One was the one I was telling you about that Jamie Noble made was the World of Shenanigans. And the other one is this incredible walkthrough of Castle Slapdash, which is the castle that much of the adventure in the player's throne occurs in this castle. This guy did this like a cross section walkthrough, and it's really a cool piece of art. The option to get one or both of those posters will also be there, but postcards, stickers, all that stuff, I've kind of fooled around with that in the past. I just think it's more trouble than it's worth. And I don't know if people care, to be frank.
I like the keep it simple method. I think it's a valid thing, especially from digital and print, especially with tariffs and all this other stuff that's happening too. So obviously the digital only versions are very appealing to the masses these days. And I think it's ease of use at this point. It's not even a matter of, oh, can I get a printed copy? Sure, by all means. But 90% of the time we're on a mobile device of some way, something, shape, or form. So it's pretty
Totally.
amazing that way. And I've talked to other creators as well that because of the current issues north and south, from a marketing standpoint, from a shipping standpoint, it just the costs are not feasible anymore. So maybe that'll change. Who knows? But we're gonna read our content how we read our content. Global Comics is a good platform for comics. A lot of creators I've talked to as well go there and have their content there, and I think it's a great starting point. Hey, if you've never read Baby Barbarian, here's your first step into this amazing world.
Yeah, and I don't even know. I might just keep shipping to the US this time, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. That's because you guys are just right there. You know what I mean?
I mean, unless you're doing a book run up north,
We're pretty close to the border. We've thought about that in the past, to be honest.
You mentioned Bone. You also mentioned Asterix. What is it about those comics that Baby Barbarian is in line with, and what is it that Baby Barbarian is different from those particular styles?
Ooh, that's a great question. Hmm. I actually, my son, we got into Bone. I was really impressed. I think it came out in 92. Like I graduated high school in 92. So that's a while ago now. But I was reading it with my son and it holds up really well. It still looks, Bone still looks to me like a pretty modern comic. I mean, gosh, I don't, I don't want to answer this in a way that is like saying somehow my stuff is better than other stuff. But because those are both really they're just classic, they're iconic comics, right? Both of them, Bone and Asterix. I think one of the things about Baby Barbarian is the world is really lush. You know what I mean? The world is really lush, not just with the art, but really, I think the characters and the situations that I created, both of the artists are done such an incredible job of realizing it. And I think that's a team effort. Bone is great. I think it's fantastic, but it doesn't feel as lush to me, to be honest. In Baby Bar, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of groups that are sort of intersecting and bouncing off of each other. And they all have their own feel. Like in the second one, they run into the murder hobos. That's like a group of four ne'er-do-wells, right? They all have their whole design, their whole look is different. I mean, is unique. There's one guy, he's got pistols. He's that sort of like the what is that called? That like Warhammer thing, right? Where they use guns. I think it's very lush. Now with Asterix, I mean, Asterix is so iconic. I mean, you can't really try to compare yourself to that. There are good enough similarities there, I think. I think for sure there's some similarities. And I've read Asterix and I love Asterix. And the humor in Asterix is very close, I would say. Even the look, with all the funny mustaches and all the Gaulish hair and everything. And my barbarians are very hairy as well. So yeah, Asterix, if I can pay homage to Asterix, I'll be happy. That's such a classic. It's just brilliant. It's just brilliant.
Everyone has one person that inspired them on their path to where they are today. Who was that for you?
Oh man. Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, there's so many I started writing when I was very, very young. Yeah, just my family. We had a lot of books in my house. We read a lot. It was before there was, cable was rampant. It was still almost back in the three screen days. My very early youth was that time. I mean, but that's a really hard question. Somebody who I really like as a comic book writer is Kurt Busiek. He's written for Marvel, I think DC, and he also makes a comic called Astro City. Astro City, it's like four color comic, but then it has very adult, sort of mature themes. And also, what I like about him as a writer is he has a lot of heart. You probably remember when we got tag teamed by like Watchmen and then Dark Knight. And then after that, the 90s just went down into this, like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, everybody's brooding and this and that and the other thing, and
Superman mullet, things like that. Yeah,
um,
yeah.
why not? Why not?
It's the 90s. Yeah.
I kind of got out of it at that time. I think that the direction it was going, everyone was overly serious. Then I have to go back and then I have to say Chris Claremont, and you mentioned Nina before, Nina Pizzarillos. That was a person that we mutually know and that you had just featured on. She wrote this beautiful story about the Phoenix Saga, and in her story, she mentions a panel from that comic that I remember vividly, where the laser comes up and it fires at Jean Grey and it disintegrates her. Yeah, that Phoenix Saga was very influential. And again, Chris Claremont also, he's somebody, he got kind of schmaltzy at times. He used the word proverbial a lot, which is kind of fun, but kind of like over the top. But he wrote a lot of stuff, and his best work, like the Phoenix Saga, I think is about as good work as you can really find, not just in comics, but in tragedy, right? Shakespearean tragedy, you know? So yeah, I mean, I would put those two guys. And then also just on a more personal level, as mentioned, when I was a kid, my grandma was really sweet. She was down the road from us and 2 blocks down, and we would go down there, and she was always so supportive of whenever we do any kind of art or anything. She was really supportive of it. And so we'd write stories for her and give her stories, and she's like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I guess it went to my little head, and I thought I was an amazing writer. And the next thing I know, I just haven't stopped. So I can also thank my grandma.
Grandmothers are always so supportive, and they still make the best sandwiches. Don't know
Yeah.
how they do it.
She was amazing. She was real fast. I'm gonna extol her a minute. She was very, very simple person, but she wrote poetry. She played piano by ear. She had a little pottery wheel in like her kitchen, and she was, because we're Northwesterners. There's a lot of rain back then, and it was like didn't have TV, so she was just very books of poetry, and she's just a very, very artistic and lovely person. A lovely person. Yeah.
From a professional standpoint, you have created many works, and now you've jumped into the comic scene with three amazing books, of course, for Baby Barbarian. So, from a professional standpoint, you are successful. Do you consider yourself personally successful?
Holy cow, that's a tough one. Because, personally I mean, there's a lot that goes into that question, right? I'm a little long in the teeth now, and I mean, I've definitely been through it, you know what I mean? And I think I can say at this point that, yeah, I consider myself personally successful. I'm lucky to have a good family here. I have another son who's already in college and he's doing well. I have a lot of good friends, guys that I grew up with that I'm still very close with. And in the creative world, I had a table read the other day for a screenplay I wrote with a bunch of actors here down in Harbor Island Studios here in Seattle. I don't know if you've heard this before, Kurt, but they mention, sometimes people are like, the people who make it are just the ones who just don't stop. In fact, right before I was in an interview with you, I was talking with my wife, and I was like, I know I'm so stubborn, hon. I'm sorry. I just gave up at this point, trying to stop. But hopefully she's getting something else out of this relationship.
Isn't that compromise?
You know what? That's a beautiful way to put it. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. You love somebody, you got to let them do their thing. Especially when you're a creative type. There's a few people that who are definitely similar in that thing where they're just not going to stop, and you just know it. So you just got to roll with it. You got to roll with it.
The reverse of success is failure. How do you deal with your failures?
How do I deal with my failures? I don't know. I guess I kind of pretend they didn't happen. Maybe there's some selective memory stuff going on. And also, I think there's a little bit of, writers well enough that, writers are always going to tell you that there's some big reason why things happen. You know what I mean? They're going to justify and be like, oh, this is part of my journey. Why I ended up over here was because, I had to go through that in order to go. And if it's true, I don't know. Probably not, but we keep telling ourselves that. So It's just sort of, just to keep us going. Because otherwise we would have given up. I would have given up. So how do I deal with failures? I think in my modern life now, I don't have big failures, you know? I have small victories and I have this sort of inexorable push in a certain direction, which is just getting my work out into the world. And I don't attach too much to it, but I am pretty persistent. I don't know that I really think about failures. I think more that maybe there's a block. Okay, that door closed. Well, then that means go into this direction. You know what I mean? I don't know. That's all I got.
The young generation is looking at your work and they're becoming inspired to be creative in their own way. And the fact that you have the younger generation with your sons, maybe they're inspired to be creative in some way, shape, or form. Maybe not. Doesn't matter. But there is a younger generation that is following your path. How can they inspire the generation that follows them?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Well, I think, the themes that are in Baby Barbarian are about family, the difficulty of family, the difficulty of creating community, and keeping community. Another theme that I feel like is in Baby Barbarian is, people who can make fun out of not a lot of resources. I think that was my generation's experience. So I think that I hope and I believe that, some things that are universally true are that human beings will always need community and human beings will always need family. So I hope that if some of a younger person is reading this, maybe when they read, that these people they can argue with each other, but then they can come to a point of agreement at the end and also forgiveness, because that is also something that is human, right? Is forgiveness. And nobody is right all the time. Nobody is perfect. So if we can internalize those things, sometimes I think it's really hard, especially nowadays with the way that social media affects how people's think, that they can't show any vulnerability, that they have to pretend like everything's perfect. And I think it creates a lot of isolation in the younger generation. And hopefully it can remind people, the younger generation, that actually any kind of anything requires energy, requires commitment. If you have a long relationship, like a long marriage, like I've had a pretty long relationship with my wife now, that actually we had a split during COVID, and then we came back together. And all of that stuff coming back together, it required so much, soul searching and like really digging down to the bottom of your soul and communicating from that place. If that comes through in the comic, and then that's a perspective that somebody can carry, sort of like I mentioned earlier, about Chris Claremont and the Phoenix Saga. And I remember that. You know what I mean? I remember that stuff that I read as a kid and it carried through until now. So that'd be wonderful. I mean, I would be stoked. I'm very happy if that could inspire a young person now to keep that thread of compassion going.
If your life was a comic book, what would its title be, and what would its soundtrack be?
The title would probably be Baby Barbarian. Trying to come up with something clever, but I don't know. That's a tough one. Your questions are very they really make you dig deep. Down and Out in PNW in the Pacific Northwest. And the soundtrack would be I don't know. We'd probably put some like Frightened Rabbit in there, and I like Radiohead a lot. Some little Radiohead, The Smile. Yeah. I mean, that's just music I like, you know. Yeah.
Well, William, I do hate to say it, but that ends this particular episode of Two Geeks Talking. I want to thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Kurt. You have really good questions. They really made me think. And I'm glad that you just sprang them on me.
Well, I don't always spring them on you, but now that you have a feel for them, you'll be more prepared for next time. I'll send you the questions.
No, no, I'm serious. I like that because it really, it makes me, yeah, you get some, yeah, it really made me have to think very, very deeply. So I do like that. Yeah.
Okay, good. Because some people like them, some people are like, "Oh my gosh, I wish you would have sent them earlier."
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
I like to hold those five close to my chest, so
Yeah.
but it's
Good
not
for
like
you.
they're a secret. You could watch past interviews. It's the exact same
Yeah.
question. Where can we find you? How can we support you? Of course, where is this amazing Baby Barbarian comic and anything else you'd like to promote with web links and social media and all that stuff?
Where you can find me is, as I mentioned in the intro, we have a backer kit campaign going right now for Baby Barbarian and the Forgotten God. And the link to that will be in the description. So please come and support us. We really could use your support. Thank you.
Well, of course, you have an amazing website, owngoalbooks.com as well too, with more stuff that we didn't even touch on today because we were so focused on Baby Barbarian. So that just means you have to come back on the show and we'll talk more about your amazing career and everything like that in the future. And maybe I can wrangle Nina in for a co-host gig or something like that. That'd be
Oh, that
fun.
would be fun.
I haven't had a co-host in years, so maybe for one time off, it might be fun. So
That would be fun. Yeah, no, she's such a
she's
character.
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah,
for
she's
sure.
amazing. She's really amazing.
Well, like I said, that ends this particular episode of Two Geeks Talking. You can, of course, find this interview and 1,200 plus others on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TGT Mediate. The podcast you can find wherever you get your podcasts at Two Geeks Talking. That's TWO Geeks Talking. Don't use a number. There's no numbers whatsoever. You don't want to see that whatsoever. Two Geeks Talking on your favorite podcast platforms. And of course, as I say every week, everyone has a story to tell. It's up to me to help bring that out. Thanks for listening and watching on Two Geeks Talking.
Thank you so much, Kurt.
Oh,
Have
you're
a great
welcome.
day.